I was simply doing my job, and never imagined that finding an alien would change everything I thought I knew about Jesus. What happened that day, under a hard, blinding noon sun, still will not let me sleep. The wind skimmed the crusted snow. The rig's gauges blinked their routine digits, and none of them hinted that below me lay not just old ice, but someone's long, non-human silence. I logged coordinates, checked line pressure, matched bit speed to keep the borehole stable. The day moved by the book, as 100 days had before it, until a brittle sound, unlike bedrock or a trapped brine bubble, snapped through my gloves. The core walls arced like heated glass, and the drill lost resistance, dipping half a finger. I killed the motor, drew up the barrel, and cupped the blue cylinder with a bare palm, long enough to feel its crystalline chill. Inside, on the edge of sight, something took shape. Not bone, not wood, not any known joint. A long frame, smoothed hinge points and hollows that caught the light like smoked glass. Daylight makes these things crisp, shadows short, the ice clearer, the eye more honest. I was staring at a contour that had no right to exist beneath a shelf older than our maps, a form this latitude had preserved without permission. I carried the core beneath a windbreak to cut the sun's flare, set up daylight spectrum lamps, photographed every face, marked depths and layer lines. Under the lamps, the structure sharpened, an elongated head without the familiar relief of a mouth, broad dark recesses for eyes, a thin neck, a chest like a fragile lattice. The skin, if it was skin, looked paler than the ice itself, almost ash gray. Nothing organic is expected at this depth. No wrecks, no forgotten stations, no expedition graves. Only snow, time, and unbroken cold. My hands reverted to training. Calculate thaw time for minimal structural stress. Select tools for layer-by-layer removal without collapse. Prep a portable capsule with airflow and humidity control. In this weather, thoughts shed ornament. There is an object, a protocol, and a risk. The safe choice was to seal it, photograph, alert command. The human choice was to learn who it had been and why it was here. In clear daylight, decisions are stripped of excuses. I told myself it was for science, and that was enough to step over the inner brake. Warm air from a narrow nozzle, pressure balanced, pared back the ice millimeter by millimeter until a whole figure emerged, the height of a tall adolescent, far too slender to be terrestrial. Fingers longer than mine by a joint, joints under the skin like delicately engineered pivots. The ribcage swept in a curve alien to our anatomy. The face held a uniform smoothness where a mouth should have broken it. Only the great lids, closed, hinted at weight beneath. Not the gray-blue of ice, but the dark, volcanic sheen of obsidian. I slid the figure into the lab module, where daylight always feels clinical and clean. Compressors hummed. The intake filters winked green. The log sheet already carried lines of numbers. I pulled an emergency bio kit, adapted cuffs and sensors to unfamiliar limbs, warmed the conductive gel for placements that were, at best, educated guesses. Too many unknowns, too little time. Thawing risks cellular catastrophe. Another degree risks irreversible chemistry. But to refuse the attempt would freeze this moment into nothing more than a strange statue from an older world. When the last rind of frost cleared the chest, lamplight spread over a lattice beneath the skin. A web not like our vessels, but braided transparent threads running into hands, shoulders, neck. I placed sensors where a pulse should be and met a perfect void. No electrical murmur, no mechanical whisper. The instrument's silence was the loudest thing in the room. I eased back the heat, let time soak into tissue. From a bag, viscous drops of saline never designed for this biology, but the only available buffer fell with stubborn patience. Outside, the day refused to change. A low, bright sun, dry snow flaring in short arcs like the seconds of a giant clock. Inside, the air turned papery and crisp, every surface overexposed by white light, every action framed as if by someone else's experiment, begun long before I set foot here. I checked the numbers every 2 minutes. The same calm zeros repeated until their calm grew menacing. I tried not to name the figure, but the mind insists. If a body can survive millennia of cold without disintegration, there exists a world where such bodies are ordinary. Our story is not a single line, but a coordinate in someone else's grid. We are trained to read human traces in snow and strata. Today, the snow returned something that had not asked to be found and was nonetheless lying in my reach. In high sun, it is easier to be honest about fear. Something larger than a drill string had just intersected my day. My fingers hovered over keys. My eyes hunted for any deviation. When the weighting had thinned to a wire, the hand resting on the translucent chest felt motion, so slight it could have been instrument noise if it hadn't come through flesh. Not a graph line, not a tone. A foreign, measured surge from within, like a filament tightening and releasing once. The lab's air stayed dry and bright. The world outside stayed level and white, but the axis of my hours slipped. Everything before that nudge collapsed into preparation. Everything after demanded proof that I had not imagined it, and that daylight had truly brought back a heart no one intended to wake. The first heartbeat changed everything, yet I kept working as if it were just another reading to verify. The instruments refused to recognize what I had felt, but my own senses would not lie. The pulse had been there, brief, precise, deliberate. Outside, the Antarctic day stayed mercilessly bright. Inside, the air turned thick with a silence that felt almost alive. I called for assistance through the secure line, using a pretext of equipment failure. Help would come in 2 hours. I needed a witness. When the snowcat finally appeared on the horizon, its orange hull glinting under the sun, I felt the same nervous relief one feels before admitting to a crime. The man who stepped out was not a scientist, a technician from the nearby meteorology outpost, accustomed to fixing heaters and data links, not facing what should not exist. He looked at the body inside the capsule, and something in his posture changed. No words were necessary. The figure on the table was beyond disbelief. It was a fact too solid for imagination. We began the revival protocol with the same mechanical precision we used for human patients. The thawing system circulated warm air through narrow vents, raising the internal temperature by tenths of a degree. Moisture gathered on the smooth skin, running in slow drops across the ribs. Under the lamps, the alien gray took on a faint silver hue, and I realized it wasn't skin in any biological sense, more like a flexible sheath protecting what lay beneath. The chest cavity shimmered with pale reflections, as though light passed through translucent layers not meant to be seen. The technician set up a defibrillator, though I doubted its relevance. Our instruments had never been designed for something without known anatomy. Still, we worked. I linked electrodes to the web of internal lines, adjusted voltage, and watched for any trace of bioelectrical reaction. The monitor's green line, long dead, flickered once, then again, like an echo from a place where life was only memory. A tremor ran through the figure's forearms, subtle, but real. The heartbeat returned, now steady, faint but rhythmic, resonating through the surface as if each pulse carried a coded intention. The air felt charged, static building along the walls. I noted the oxygen level, checked the chamber pressure, and realized the creature was breathing, though no chest rise could be seen. The motion came from within, slow oscillations, invisible but measurable. For the first time, I understood how fragile this moment was. One wrong impulse could destroy the only proof that humanity had never been alone. And yet, in that sterile white light, the idea of secrecy already seemed obsolete. Whatever this being was, it had survived the death of epochs. Perhaps it had waited for this, for someone to be reckless enough to wake it. The technician paced, muttering half-sentences that ended in disbelief. I wrote continuously. Temperature gradients, tissue elasticity, electrical conductance. The data made no sense, but patterns emerged. Ratios too precise to be accidental. Harmonics that repeated like musical intervals. This was not chaos. It was design. The alien remained still, eyes closed, but a change had occurred. The faint color beneath its surface deepened, from ashen gray to something closer to life. Pale silver threaded with warmth, like metal remembering the heat of its forge. No wounds, no scars, no signs of decay. It was perfect preservation, as though time had been suspended inside the ice. We decided, without saying it aloud, to keep the discovery secret. Command would never authorize a continuation. Bureaucracy kills faster than any cold. The station log would record a routine drill malfunction. The samples would stay under my supervision. The technician agreed, though his hand shook as he sealed the capsule. He had seen too much already. By the afternoon, the instrument stabilized. Heartbeat, continuous. Energy readings, rising. I stood beside the table, listening to the faint hum of the generator, the steady rhythm beneath the sensors. The creature was alive, not fully, not consciously, but undeniably alive. I recorded the final note of the day. Subject reanimated. Unknown physiology. Signs of internal restoration. Observation required. Then I turned off the lamps, letting only daylight fill the module. The body's surface caught it, reflecting a shimmer that looked almost deliberate, as if the being itself responded to sunlight. I did not yet know what it would awaken to say, but the longer I watched, the more I felt that its survival was not an accident. It was an arrival, perfectly timed, and we had just broken the seal of something far older than human history. The alien's chest rose with imperceptible rhythm throughout the morning, like the sea beneath unbroken ice. The technician had fallen asleep in the corner chair, but I remained beside the capsule, noting each fluctuation in temperature, each faint change in the color of the skin. It was no longer gray, more like pale silver with translucent veins that pulsed softly beneath the surface. Every instinct told me that whatever I had revived was not only alive, but listening. Then, near midday, the eyelids parted. The motion was smooth, deliberate, and soundless. Beneath them, two dark, liquid eyes reflected the harsh daylight pouring through the window. There was no confusion, no fear, only an immense stillness, the kind one feels when confronted with something far older than reason. I froze, waiting for movement, breath, or any sign of hostility. None came. The creature focused on me with unwavering calm. For several seconds, or minutes, I cannot say, it seemed to observe the entire room through me, as if every molecule of air carried meaning. Then its head tilted slightly, the gesture precise, almost human. A vibration followed, not a sound, but a pressure in the skull, like words forming just beyond language. My instruments reacted, static bursts, erratic patterns across the speakers, and from that chaos came something structured. The voice did not belong to air. It was as though the mind translated what it could grasp. I understood fragments, simple, clear concepts, unfinished mission, signal lost, home waiting. The technician stirred, confused, thinking I had spoken aloud. I shook my head. The creature's gaze shifted to him, then back to me, its meaning unbroken. I retrieved a field tablet, opened a mapping program, and laid it on the table beside the capsule. The alien reached out, slow, almost reverent, and placed a long, jointed finger on the screen. Instantly, the image glitched, coordinates appearing where there had been none. A point deep beneath the glacial ridge, far beyond the limits of our station's mapped terrain. It traced a path downward, spiraling, as if beneath kilometers of compressed ice. The symbols beside it were not numbers I recognized, but their symmetry implied purpose. A pattern meant to guide. I understood enough. Beneath the ice, at that location, something waited. The alien's presence here was not accidental. Its survival had been a delay, not an error. The mission remained, and it needed help. The technician protested, insisting we report this to command. I said nothing, only pointed at the instruments. Heart rate rising, core temperature stabilizing. Whatever consciousness governed that body was regaining strength. The being's gaze met mine again. This time, the pressure in my mind sharpened, the concepts merging into a single phrase that felt like both request and warning. There is little time. Daylight filled the lab, stark and unforgiving, illuminating every surface, every breath we took. I felt no fear, only an overwhelming clarity. The sense that this encounter had been written into our arrival here long before we chose to dig. The map was real, the coordinates clear, and the purpose undeniable. By the afternoon, we had made our decision. We would not inform command. The alien's existence would remain between us, at least until we verified what lay beneath the ridge. We prepared a field pack, thermals, drones, spare oxygen, cutting tools, as if for a standard ice survey. Yet every movement carried the weight of something cosmic, masquerading as routine. When I looked once more at the creature, its eyes followed the sunlight through the window, unblinking. A subtle vibration pulsed through the room, and the monitors flickered again, displaying a final message in their static noise, a sequence of coordinates ending with a symbol that resembled a spiral of light. I saved the data, not knowing whether it came from the machines or from the being itself. That night, though the sun still burned low on the horizon, for there is no darkness in this place, I felt the boundaries of my world collapse. Science had ended. Something else had begun. The alien rested silently, as if conserving energy for what was to come. And deep beneath the ice, I imagined another pulse, larger and older, waiting for us to arrive. We left the station at dawn, though in Antarctica dawn is only a lighter shade of the same endless day. The snowcat moved slowly across the frozen plain. The horizon, a line of white fire where the sun hovered, motionless. The coordinates from the alien's projection guided us toward the ridge, a labyrinth of pressure ridges and buried crevasses where no expedition had reason to go. The alien sat between us, wrapped in layers of thermal fabric, motionless yet alert. It did not seem to breathe. The technician drove, eyes fixed on the instruments, while I monitored radiation and temperature levels. Every reading stayed within normal range, yet there was a strange hum beneath the static, a frequency too low for the ear, but steady enough to feel through metal. The being's presence affected the air itself. Even the cold seemed to bend around it. Halfway through the route, the terrain changed. The snow hardened into glazed ice, transparent enough to reveal darker veins beneath. Ancient fractures, or perhaps remnants of structures pressed flat by time. The alien turned its head toward one of them and raised a hand, as if sensing something. A faint vibration tremored under the snowcat's treads, though no seismic activity registered. I marked the coordinates. We moved on. By the time we reached the ridge, the wind had died completely. The silence was absolute. No echo, no whistle through the instruments, only the soft hiss of the vehicle's exhaust. We stopped and stepped out. The air was so still, it felt like standing inside a sealed chamber. Under the glaring light, The alien's skin reflected the sky's color, pale blue fading into silver. It walked ahead with measured grace, leaving no footprints in the snow. At the base of a fractured slope, the terrain dropped abruptly. Through the ice, we saw it, a geometric outline, metallic, too symmetrical to be natural. Triangular ridges intersected in perfect alignment, converging toward a dark central seam that extended deep below the surface. The alien knelt beside it, pressing its palm against the ice. Immediately, the temperature dropped. Frost bloomed in radial patterns outward from its hand, forming concentric rings like ripples in frozen water. The technician muttered a prayer under his breath. I stood behind them, watching the instruments spiral into unreadable values. Magnetic fields reversing, atmospheric ions spiking. The alien turned to me, eyes black and bottomless, and the same pressure filled my skull again. Open, beneath, waiting. It pointed toward a narrow fissure just wide enough for a human to enter. We began to dig. Hours passed, sweat freezing against our faces despite the constant sunlight. The ice was harder than stone, layered in crystalline sheets that rang when struck. The alien touched the surface occasionally, and the material softened, as though responding to its presence. By evening, though the sun had not moved, we had opened a passage leading down into pale blue darkness. Inside, the air was warmer. Light filtered through the walls as if trapped within them. The tunnel led to a vast cavity, a chamber carved from pure ice, its floor smooth and dry. At its center rose a shape half buried under frost, a metallic structure, curved and seamless, the size of a small building. Its surface gleamed faintly with shifting reflections that moved even when we stood still. It was unmistakably artificial. The alien approached it slowly. The hum returned, louder now, resonating through my chest. The technician stepped back, overwhelmed by the vibration. I forced myself to keep filming, though the camera's feed distorted, pixels bending like waves. The being placed its hand on the hole, and a section of the ice evaporated instantly, revealing patterns. Glyphs arranged in spirals, unlike any language but too precise to be random. Then came a flood of understanding. Not words, but concepts, pressed directly into consciousness. The being had come here millennia ago as an observer. It spoke of the descendants of the first, those born from one who had come before all others, a figure of light sent to seed compassion among a violent species. That species was us. I could not move. The chamber glowed with refracted light, and beneath that light lay a truth I was not ready to confront. The alien turned back toward me, its expression unchanged, yet I felt its urgency. It was searching not for relics, but for confirmation, proof that the mission of the first had not failed. Above us, the ice cracked with the sound of distant thunder. The technician shouted something I did not hear. The ridge was shifting, pressure building. We retreated to the tunnel entrance as the hum grew into a pulse, slow, rhythmic, and vast, like a buried heart stirring after too long a sleep. By the time we reached the snowcat, the fissure had begun to close behind us, sealing the chamber as if it had never been there. The instruments still quivered with residual readings, and the alien's gaze remained fixed on the ridge. Its presence radiated calm, but beneath that calm was something deeper. Grief, maybe, or the memory of a task left incomplete. The drive back was silent. Neither of us spoke. The technician's hands trembled on the wheel, and I could still hear the hum through the metal floor, as if the buried structure continued to breathe beneath the ice. The alien did not move again, but when the wind returned, carrying its dry hiss across the plain, I thought I heard a whisper within it. Not sound, but meaning. The first was human. The storm began before we reached the station. Fine crystals of snow moved horizontally, erasing the horizon until sky and ground became one blinding plane of white. The alien sat motionless in the rear seat, the faint pulse beneath its skin steady and unwavering, while our vehicle trembled in the wind. The technician muttered that we should have turned back hours ago, but there was no longer a path to follow, only coordinates locked in my mind and the silent presence beside us that seemed immune to fear. When we finally returned, the modules were buried halfway in drifts. We unloaded the equipment in near silence and secured the samples from the ridge. The alien followed without instruction, its movements precise and almost weightless, as if gravity meant something different to it. I sealed the lab door behind us, and the wind outside vanished into distant static. We began the decontamination routine automatically. Heaters, filters, sealed airflow. Not because we believed it necessary, but because procedure was the last familiar thing left. Once inside, I activated the data screens. The instruments synced with the readings we had taken below the ridge. The pattern was clear now. Deep beneath the ice, directly under the coordinates, something metallic was transmitting a faint, rhythmic signal, one that matched the alien's biological pulse exactly. It stepped closer to the screen and raised its hand again. The signal amplified instantly, as though responding to recognition. Then the meaning unfolded, not through words, but through impressions. A story, a warning. Images formed in my mind, layered like overlapping transparencies. Planets orbiting dying suns, vessels descending into young worlds, chambers filled with sleeping shapes, suspended in translucent capsules. Each one pulsed faintly with internal light, awaiting command. The technician staggered back, clutching his head, overwhelmed by what he saw. I steadied myself against the console, translating the flood of perception into fragments I could understand. The being's mission had not been exploration, but observation, evaluation. Its species had seeded multiple worlds long before ours existed. Earth was one of them, born from a single experiment. A man sent from their own civilization to test whether compassion could sustain an intelligent race. The first, the one who brought the breath. If the experiment failed, if the species descended into irreversible violence, the contingency would activate. The capsules beneath the ice, hidden for millennia, each holding an older, more efficient form of life, created to reset what had gone wrong. The alien's heart, that slow, unrelenting pulse, was tied to the control system of the structure we had found. If it stopped before the signal was sent, the failsafe would interpret it as confirmation. The human experiment had failed. The reset would begin. We stood frozen, surrounded by the hum of machines and the low wind pressing against the metal walls. The alien looked almost weightless under the harsh white lamps, its eyes absorbing the light without reflection. The sense it conveyed was urgent, but calm, a quiet plea. The communication array buried under the ridge had to be repaired and reactivated. The message it carried was not to summon destruction, but to prevent it, to tell its origin world that the children of the first had not yet extinguished their light. I glanced at the technician. His face was pale, his hands shaking, yet his eyes were clear. We understood what had to be done. We would go back. The storm outside no longer mattered. The ice, the danger, the exhaustion, all of it shrank against the scale of what lay before us. The alien moved to the viewport, staring out into the swirling white. Its reflection merged with the glare until it became indistinguishable from the sky. For the first time, I thought I saw sorrow in its stillness. Not fear, but regret, as though it had seen this pattern before, countless times, across countless worlds. Civilizations rising, forgetting their purpose, forcing the watchers to decide whether to let them live or start again. We began to prepare for the return expedition. Equipment had to be modified, power cells insulated, cables rerouted. Every action carried a new weight, the awareness that each screw and circuit might determine whether our species continued to exist. The technician packed silently. I recorded the readings, encrypting them under false labels. No one beyond these walls could be allowed to know. By late afternoon, the storm began to ease. Sunlight diffused through the thin veil of snow, filling the room with a strange, almost sacred glow. The alien turned from the window, eyes fixed on me. The pressure in my head returned, soft this time, almost compassionate. A single thought passed through the silence. Help me send it home. I nodded without speaking. The technician tightened the final strap on his pack. Outside, the snow settled into stillness again, the world bright and unreal. Beneath that calm surface, somewhere under miles of ice, the buried structure pulsed faintly, like a waiting verdict, counting down the seconds until judgment. We left again at midday, under a sun that never moved. The air was dry and crystalline, scattering light until every direction looked like the same impossible horizon. The snowcat dragged its weight across the plateau, following the faint signal now pulsing through our instruments, the heartbeat of something buried, ancient, and patient. The alien sat beside me, eyes half closed, as if guiding not with sight, but memory. Its presence was steady, almost meditative, a contrast to the tremor running through my own hands. The technician asked no questions this time. We both knew that explanations no longer mattered. The mission was simple. Repair the beacon, send the message, stop whatever mechanism waited to erase us. Yet as we descended back into the ridge, the alien began to change. Its posture less rigid, its breathing heavier. For the first time, it looked mortal. Inside the ice chamber, the light felt different. The walls glowed faintly from within, casting an even daylight that needed no lamp. The metallic structure, the ship, or whatever it was, seemed to hum in recognition of the being's return. When it touched the hull, the symbols flared with slow rhythm, like ancient code awakening after an eternity of silence. Then came the story. Not through words or sound, but through waves of perception that flooded the mind. The alien stood before the glowing hull, and every pulse from its hand carried images too vivid to dismiss. I saw a world of gray plains under twin suns, a civilization of calm intelligence and perfect design. They had mastered life itself. No hunger, no war, no death. But with perfection came emptiness. They had forgotten empathy, replaced it with logic, efficiency, order. Until one day, something impossible appeared among them. A man. Warm-blooded, fragile, radiant in a way no technology could replicate. He was not one of them, yet he spoke in their language, lived among them, and revealed to them what they had long lost: compassion. They called him the Being of Dawn, the one who breathed, the first. He taught that existence was not about control, but mercy. That intelligence without love was only another form of decay. For a time, they listened, but perfection resists change. Fear took root, fear of weakness, of contamination. So they sent him away, not as punishment, but as a final test, to plant his kind in a younger world, untouched by their corruption. That world was Earth, and we were his descendants. The alien's memories pierced like sunlight through ice, glimpses of that world fading behind a translucent veil, the first departing on a vessel of light, his face indistinct, yet unmistakably human. I felt my knees weaken under the weight of it. The idea that our species might have been engineered, not by cold mechanics, but as an experiment in kindness, felt at once divine and unbearable. The technician had fallen to the floor, eyes wide, whispering fragments of prayer. The alien's body flickered faintly, its internal light dimming and brightening in intervals. The ship responded, opening a narrow channel of soundless energy through the chamber. The meaning was clear. Time was running out. I approached, heart pounding, and laid my hand beside its own on the metallic surface. The vibration coursed through my bones. Not pain, but recognition. For a moment, I saw us as they saw us. Violent, disordered, capable of destruction, yet still carrying a spark that defied extinction. That spark was the message they had waited to confirm. The aliens' mission was never to judge us, but to determine whether compassion had survived in the chaos we became. Its eyes turned toward me, and for the first time, I sensed gratitude. The link between it and the ship weakened. The light dimmed. The technician began connecting the power cells, his movements frantic. Sparks leapt from the cables, and the air filled with the acrid scent of ozone. I monitored the instruments. Transmission strength low, energy insufficient. Without full synchronization, the signal would fail. The alien stepped back, clutching its chest. Under the surface of its skin, the silver glow flickered, unstable. I realized then that the heart we had revived was not merely biological. It was a transmitter, a living key. If it failed, the beacon would die with it, and the failsafe would activate. I shouted to the technician to stabilize the output, but he shook his head. Power reserves were nearly depleted. The storm had drained our backup cells. We had hours, maybe less. The alien looked from him to me, then to the distant light pulsing in the hull. The message was simple, unspoken. There is still a way. I felt the walls tremble, a faint, rhythmic vibration echoing from below. The ship was awakening, sensing the readiness of its pilot. The alien placed its hand once more on the glowing hull. The symbol shifted into new alignment, the first phase of transmission. Then it turned toward me. The pressure in my mind grew unbearable, filled with an emotion that was not fear, not sorrow, but something close to farewell. When it withdrew its hand, the ship remained luminous, self-sustaining, as if charged by the act itself. The alien's light faded a little more, but its expression stayed serene. The technician stood beside me, whispering, "It's trying to finish what the first began." Outside, the wind rose again, scattering snow into silver veils that danced across the ridge. Inside the chamber, daylight pulsed through the ice like blood through transparent veins. The ship was alive, waiting. And for the first time since this began, I understood that our survival depended not on strength or knowledge, but on whether we still carried, within all our flaws, even a fragment of what the first had taught them. The alien lowered its gaze. Its voice, not heard, but felt, lingered in my mind. The seed still burns, but the test is not over. Then the hum deepened, vibrating through the ground, and the metallic floor beneath our feet began to shift. The next phase had already begun. The transmission chamber vibrated like a living organ beneath the ice. Every surface shimmered with faint light, every sound muffled by the weight of miles above us. The technician was recalibrating the power cells, his hands numb inside the thick gloves. The alien stood motionless, a silhouette against the pulsing hull, its light dim but steady. For a few brief minutes, I believed we might succeed. Then the radio came alive. A distorted voice broke through the static, human, urgent, commanding. Our base frequency had been intercepted. Unidentified energy spike detected. All personnel return immediately. I froze. We had been found. The technician turned pale. His lips moved soundlessly before he whispered the words I didn't want to hear. Military coordinates. Outside, the sensors showed heat signatures approaching from the western quadrant. Vehicles, drones, aircraft. The storm had cleared enough for satellites to see everything. They were coming for us. The alien looked at me, and in that silent gaze I felt no fear, only resignation. It had seen this pattern before. Discovery, panic, containment. I tried to signal the base, to stall them, but the communications were already being jammed. The beacon's pulse grew weaker. The ship's hum faltered. Without the final surge of power, the signal would fail. And with it, the last proof that humanity's experiment had succeeded. The technician worked faster, rerouting power from the snowcat batteries. Sparks flew as he connected the final couplings. The alien placed its hand over his, guiding the motion. The touch left a faint glow on the metal, like heat signatures fading through time. Then the ice cracked, a single thunderous sound that silenced us all. Chunks of frost fell from the ceiling. The hull emitted a low moan, a resonance that shook the entire chamber. I shouted for the technician to stop, but it was too late. The new power surge overloaded the stabilizers. The lights flared white, and the entire structure shuddered like a heart misfiring. The alien staggered. Its form flickered, and for an instant its skin became translucent, revealing streams of light coursing through its veins like rivers of fire. The technician lunged to disconnect the circuit, but the ground split beneath him. The floor gave way, swallowing the generator into the abyss below. I caught his arm just before he fell, but his glove tore on the sharp edge of metal. His face, a mixture of terror and peace, vanished into the glowing chasm as the hull sealed itself again with a blinding flash. The silence that followed felt endless. When the light faded, only the alien and I remained. The hum returned, quieter, more rhythmic, like controlled breathing. The loss was unbearable, yet the being's expression did not change. It turned toward me and extended its hand, pressing its palm to my chest. The pain was immediate, a jolt, not physical, but internal, as if a wave of electricity had crossed the boundary between bodies. Through that contact, I understood its message without words. The signal was nearly ready, but its own energy was fading. The link between its heart and the ship's core was fracturing. Above us, engines roared. The snowcat's scanners confirmed multiple aerial drones descending on our coordinates. In less than an hour, they would reach the ridge. The military would not listen. They would classify, secure, and bury everything we had seen. Humanity's chance to prove itself, to show the light had not gone out, would vanish in a report stamped top secret. The alien's pulse flickered again. It walked slowly toward the ship, every movement deliberate, as if fighting gravity itself. Its reflection shimmered across the ice like a fading mirage. I tried to follow, but the heat from the structure forced me back. The temperature spiked to unbearable levels as the ship drew power directly from the being's body. The floor glowed beneath its feet. For a moment, the chamber became weightless. The air vibrated like liquid, every molecule trembling. A sequence of lights ran across the hull. Blue, then white, then pure gold. The alien collapsed to its knees, but did not fall. Its voice entered my mind once more, faint and fractured. The message must leave. You must finish it if I cannot. I tried to move closer, but the heat drove me back. My suit sensors screamed overload. The ship's core began to spin, not physically, but visually, as though light itself was folding inward. Through the glare, I saw the alien's body dissolve into the same luminous geometry as the vessel's markings. It wasn't dying. It was merging, becoming the signal itself. Then the light imploded, and everything went silent. My instruments went dead. The only sound left was the faint whine of approaching rotors above the surface. I looked up through the fissure we had entered and saw shadows crossing the snow, figures in black descending from helicopters, their shapes sharp against the endless white. The alien's body was gone. The ship lay dim, inert, its glow extinguished. I stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by melting frost and the echo of a heartbeat that was no longer there. The transmission was incomplete, the message unsent. I stumbled toward the exit, climbing through collapsing tunnels of ice, each breath heavy with the weight of failure. When I reached the surface, the sunlight was blinding, and soldiers were already spreading across the ridge. They did not speak. They only pointed their weapons, signaling me to stop. Somewhere beneath my boots, buried under kilometers of ice, a faint pulse continued, weaker now, but persistent. The heart of the ship, the last remnant of the being's light. And though I could not hear it, I felt it. The hum of something still alive, waiting for one final spark to carry its message home. They brought me back to the station under armed escort. The snowcat convoy moved through the blinding daylight, a trail of black shapes against infinite white. The technicians in dark uniforms avoided looking at me. Their faces were covered by goggles and masks, yet I could feel their suspicion. No one spoke. Only the rhythmic hum of the engines and the distant drone of helicopters followed us across the plateau. Inside the research compound, everything was sealed. My identification was confiscated. My personal logs and cameras disappeared without acknowledgement. The corridors were silent except for the constant ventilation hiss. I was placed in a debriefing room, bright, windowless, too clean to be real. They asked nothing at first. They only watched, waiting to see what I would do. After several hours, a man in a white coat entered. He spoke with the calm tone of someone trained to suppress emotion. On the table, he placed a data drive, my field tablet, and a printout of the coordinates we had followed. His question was simple. What did you find beneath the ridge? I told the truth, though my voice felt distant, almost mechanical. The being, the ship, the signal. I described everything exactly as it happened. He listened without reaction, eyes steady, pen unmoving. When I finished, he slid the printout toward me. Across the coordinates was a red stamp. Erased. Later that day, they transferred me to an observation module, claiming it was for medical recovery. I knew it was containment. Through the glass, I could see the ridge in the distance, swarmed with activity. Metal cranes pierced the ice. Drones hovered like insects, lowering instruments into the chasm. Whatever was left of the ship was being dismantled, cataloged, controlled. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the monitors in my room flickered to life, not with the station feed, but with static. In the noise, faint patterns appeared, spirals of light forming and dissolving. It was the same rhythm as before, the same pulse that had guided us. The alien was still there, beneath the ice, trying to reach through whatever interference they had built above it. The guard outside noticed the signal and cut the power. The screen went dark, but the image remained imprinted in my mind, a pattern that refused to fade. That night, when they brought me water and rations, one of the men, younger than the rest, his posture too rigid to hide his nerves, lingered for a moment by the door. He whispered just one phrase, "It's still active." Then he left. Hours passed. The light in the corridor never dimmed. In Antarctica, there is no night, and inside that facility there was no time. My thoughts replayed every moment from the ridge, the hum, the light, the way the being had merged with its ship. I began to wonder whether it had truly died, or if what I had witnessed was something else. Translation. Transformation. The following morning, the young guard returned. He entered silently, glancing over his shoulder before sliding a small object across the table, a portable drive wrapped in foil. "They're deleting everything," he said under his breath. But some fragments survived in the core server. audio files, visual sequences. I copied what I could. Then he walked out before I could respond. I connected the drive to the console as soon as I was alone. The screen filled with static, then gradually resolved into blurred images. The chamber beneath the ice, viewed from the drone's perspective. The alien's body stood before the ship, radiating faint light. The camera's timestamp marked it hours after we were extracted. The being was moving, not fully alive, not fully gone, its outline shifting, dissolving into the ship's metallic surface. Then, for a fraction of a second, the image stabilized. Across the hull, the glyphs blazed bright gold, forming a single phrase in human language, translated automatically by the system's AI. He did not die. He waits. I froze. The technician's sacrifice, the aliens merging with the ship, the incomplete transmission, all of it converged into that one message. The being of light, the first, was not a relic of the past. He still existed, somewhere beyond the reach of the instruments that measured distance and time. And now, through this faint signal, he was reminding us that the test wasn't over. Before I could back up the data, the door burst open. 2 men entered, their movements sharp and rehearsed. One disconnected the console, the other took the drive. They said nothing, only gestured for me to stand. As they led me through the corridor, I passed a row of screens showing the excavation site. The ridge had been completely sealed. Heavy machinery was burying it under layers of ice, erasing every trace. But I noticed one thing they hadn't seen. In the feed's upper corner, the static was pulsing. Slow, deliberate, rhythmic. The same heartbeat, the same signal. Faint, but alive. They brought me to another room and closed the door behind me. The lights dimmed automatically, and a soft hum filled the space. On the wall opposite, a single sentence appeared in white letters, projected from an unseen source. Do not fear the silence. He is within it. The letters faded. The room went still. Somewhere beneath the ice, something had awakened again. And for the first time, I realized the story was far older than the alien, the ship, or even humanity itself. A story still unfolding in the space between our faith and our forgetting. They came for me before sunrise, though in this place, sunrise meant nothing. The light outside never changed, only the shadows inside did. 4 men entered my room without a word. Their uniforms were unmarked, their expressions unreadable. They bound my wrists, not violently, just efficiently, as if I were a specimen being cataloged. One of them held a small metal case, a portable signal jammer. The moment it powered on, the faint hum I'd been hearing since the ridge vanished. They led me through the corridor, past sealed doors and dim glass panels. Inside some rooms, I caught glimpses of equipment, deconstruction labs, cryo containers, fragments of metallic debris laid out on sterile tables. The remnants of the ship. Each piece was tagged, logged, stripped of context. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic. The atmosphere was not military or scientific. It was something colder, bureaucratic, precise, final. They took me to a transport module parked on the landing field. Beyond it, a column of smoke rose from the excavation site. The ridge was being filled again, frozen over by machines designed to simulate natural glacial layers. Within days, it would be as if the anomaly had never existed. I felt the reality of it settle like frost inside my chest. The truth was being buried faster than ice could form. We flew north for several hours. The helicopter windows were tinted, but I recognized the ocean when it appeared. An endless mirror of light. No horizon, just reflection. Eventually, we landed on a gray platform built into the ice shelf, far from any official map. A structure rose from its center, a steel tower without insignia, surrounded by satellite dishes and black storage tanks. Inside, they removed my restraints and escorted me into an interrogation hall. It was silent except for the hum of ventilation and the distant drone of generators. In the middle of the room sat a glass partition. On the other side, the alien, or what was left of it. It was suspended upright in a cylindrical containment pod, surrounded by cables and monitoring tubes. The body looked intact, but its glow was gone. The eyes were closed, the skin pale gray again, frozen in some equilibrium between life and death. Dozens of sensors traced its vitals, faint electromagnetic oscillations, pulse intervals, frequencies far below the human range. It was neither alive nor dead. It was being studied. The man in charge entered. No name tag, no insignia, just an air of authority that needed none. He sat across from me with a tablet and began to speak calmly, almost politely. He asked about the transmission, about the signal of compassion, about my exposure to non-human consciousness. His words were clinical, but his tone carried something darker, curiosity mixed with control. I told him everything again. The awakening, the ship, the mission, the message about the first. He listened in silence, tapping occasionally on the tablet. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "You misunderstand what you found. It was not a visitor. It was a remnant, a failed design. The story it told you was a psychological construct, a way to manipulate empathy, nothing more." He gestured toward the containment pod. "This is not a god, not a messenger. It's an instrument, a machine that mimics faith." I wanted to believe him, to find refuge in the simplicity of that explanation. But when I looked at the alien's suspended body, I saw movement, not physical, but in the reflection of the glass. Its image flickered, a ripple of light behind the surface. And for the briefest instant, I felt the same pressure in my mind that I had felt beneath the ice. Do not believe them. The official noticed my reaction. He smiled faintly, then signaled the guards. They injected something into my arm, clear fluid, cold as melted snow. The room softened around the edges. His voice continued, distant now, blending with the hum of the generators. "You will be relocated for debriefing. Your testimony will be reconstructed for accuracy. Afterward, you will be released. You will remember only what is necessary." The sedative blurred the world into streaks of white and gray. As they lifted me, I caught one last glimpse of the containment pod. The alien's eyes were open. Not wide, not expressive, just open, dark, and infinite. The instruments around it flickered erratically, readings spiking off scale. One of the scientists shouted something, but I was already fading, consciousness slipping through the thin ice of awareness. The last thing I remember before everything went black was a sound that shouldn't have existed in a sealed room. A heartbeat. Slow, deep, resonant. Not mine. Not human. When I awoke again, I was somewhere else. The walls were smooth, metallic, humming softly. My clothes were clean, my memories fragmented. A voice over the intercom repeated a phrase I would later learn to fear. "Remain calm. You are safe. You are in containment for observation." Outside my door, footsteps echoed. Precise, synchronized. An institution without a name. A purpose without confession. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the ridge, the light, the message. But all that remained clear was the echo of that final heartbeat, buried deep under the ice. Steady, patient, waiting for something no protocol could ever suppress. Days, or perhaps weeks, passed without measure. The light in my room never changed, and the air carried the same artificial scent, as if sterilized of time itself. The walls were white, seamless, humming faintly with electrical rhythm. Every few hours, they brought food through a slot in the door. I ate without hunger. slept without dreams. My memories began to fade at the edges, not from trauma, but from deliberate design. Each morning, I woke knowing less about why I was here. But on what I later learned was the 10th day, something shifted. The door opened, not with the usual mechanical hiss, but by a manual code. A man entered, unarmed, his posture uncertain. He wore no uniform, only a gray coat and a badge without an emblem. He looked at me as if confirming that I was real. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but tense. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "But I read your file before it was sealed. You're not insane. What you saw under the ice, it's real." I didn't answer at first. My thoughts moved sluggishly, like frozen water. He placed a tablet on the table and turned it toward me. On the screen flickered an image. The ridge, the chamber, the ship half buried beneath the translucent ice. The photo was dated 3 days ago. "They've reactivated the site," he said. "Not for research, for containment. The entity still emits low-frequency bursts, and every time it does, the instruments around the world spike. They're afraid of what it might be sending." He leaned closer. "You're the only person who made direct neural contact with it. They were going to erase you completely, but I convinced them to delay the procedure. I believe it's trying to finish what it started." The mention of erasure pierced through the fog in my mind. "Foreign memory," I murmured, though I wasn't sure how I remembered the name. He nodded. "That's what they call themselves now. A coalition task force formed after the Rosetta anomalies. Their job isn't discovery, it's deletion. They preserve human stability by editing it." He tapped the screen again. The image changed. Schematics of the alien vessel dissected into sections. "They think this craft was some kind of transmitter. It's drawing energy from the Earth's magnetic field, but they don't understand what it's sending. We intercepted fragments, mathematical sequences, mirrored DNA codons, and something that looks like language, but not ours." He paused, his expression heavy. One line repeated in every burst: "The seed of light endures." The phrase cut through me like a memory half remembered. It was the same concept the being had tried to convey before merging with its ship. Compassion, endurance, continuity. The test of whether humanity still carried the fragment of what the first had left behind. The agent's tone dropped. "They'll move the body tomorrow. After that, no one will ever see it again. I can get you out tonight, but you'll have to trust me." I stared at him, searching for deception. His eyes were tired but steady, the kind that belonged to someone who had already broken several rules to be here. I nodded. He handed me a thermal coat and a pair of mirrored goggles. "Keep your head down. Don't talk. There's a maintenance lift that bypasses security. From there, we can reach the lower hangar." We moved through the corridors like shadows, the sound of our boots drowned by the drone of ventilation. Beyond one window, I saw laboratories' rows of transparent pods filled with milky fluid. Inside, some of them floated metallic fragments. Inside others, shapes disturbingly human, as if caught between forms. I didn't ask. When we reached the lower levels, the sound changed. Deeper, resonant, like the pulse of the ridge itself. The agent stopped beside a sealed steel door. A biometric panel glowed red. "Behind this," he whispered, "is where they keep it." The scanner beeped once, twice, then the door slid open. Inside, suspended in a vertical tank of translucent gel, was the alien. Its eyes were open again, dark and endless, reflecting faint light from within. Sensors floated around it like metallic petals. The hum filled the air, low and steady, vibrating in my bones. I stepped closer despite myself. The agent stayed by the door, glancing nervously down the corridor. I pressed my palm to the glass. The surface was cold, but something beneath it responded, a flicker of warmth, a pulse. The hum deepened. Lights along the wall flickered, monitors spiking with unreadable data. The same pressure I had felt beneath the ice returned, flooding my skull. Images formed behind my eyes. Mountains, oceans, faces of people I had never seen. Humanity, stretched across centuries, fragile and beautiful. And through it all, one voice, calm and familiar. Do not fear the keepers of silence. The message is already moving. The agent shouted something behind me. Alarms blared. The tank's lights flared bright gold. I stumbled back as the gel began to glow from within. The being's shape blurred, dissolving into streams of light that twisted upward, piercing the ceiling like invisible fire. Security forces stormed the corridor. The agent drew his weapon, not to fight, but to buy time. He looked back at me and said one final sentence before the sound of gunfire drowned everything. Go to the ridge. Finish it. I ran. Down the service tunnels, through the hum of sirens, until the cold hit me like a wall. Outside, the world was nothing but blinding snow and mechanical echoes. Behind me, the facility burned from within, its lights flickering like distant stars. The sky above was unnaturally bright, a single beam of white stretching from the horizon, the ridge. The signal had reawakened, and for the first time since this began, I understood. The being hadn't escaped. It had sent itself through the transmission, carried within the data, alive in another form. I tightened the coat around me and started walking toward the light. The ridge was visible long before I reached it, a jagged line of silver light cutting through the endless white, as if the earth itself had been sliced open by something divine. The storm had cleared completely. The air was still, unnaturally clear, and the sun glared from every surface until the world looked made of glass. I walked the final kilometers alone, following the pulse that grew stronger with every step. It wasn't sound anymore, but resonance, a pattern threading through the air, through my heartbeat, through the snow beneath my boots. By the time I arrived, the entrance to the chamber had already reopened. The ice around it was melting in perfect symmetry, as though carved by unseen hands. Heat shimmered across the fissure. I descended slowly, one hand on the wall, breath fogging against the pale light. The tunnel widened into the familiar space, the buried sanctuary where the alien's ship had once slept. But now the ship was awake. Its hull was no longer dull metal. It pulsed with living light, slow and rhythmic, like a gigantic lung drawing breath. The air itself trembled, filled with fine particles that drifted like dust, illuminated by the sun. I felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense of recognition. It was the same feeling I had the first time I touched the creature's chest, the pulse of something vast, patient, and alive. I stepped forward, and the ship responded. The floor rippled faintly, acknowledging my presence. Lines of light spread outward from where I stood, weaving into the patterns on the hull. The glyphs that had once been incomprehensible now glowed with quiet coherence, shifting between forms until they resembled language, not letters, but meaning. I understood them without translation. Signal ready. Transmission incomplete. Awaiting final confirmation. For a moment, I hesitated. The alien was gone. The agent who'd saved me was dead or captured. The organization hunting us would soon arrive to bury this truth once more. And yet here, beneath the ice, the heart of something older than civilization itself still beat, waiting for someone, anyone, to finish what it had begun. I approached the central console, a raised platform surrounded by concentric circles of light. The heat was intense, though not painful, as if the energy welcomed contact. I placed my hand on the surface. The pulse quickened instantly, aligning with mine. Then, without warning, the light surged, climbing up my arm, through my chest, into my mind. It wasn't pain, it was memory. Not mine, but humanity's. Images cascaded in overwhelming succession. The first fires, the first wars, the first act of mercy between strangers. Faces blurred across centuries, united by a single thread, the capacity to care, even in destruction. I saw cities rise and fall, species adapt and perish, but again and again, compassion returned, fragile yet indestructible. The meaning became clear. The signal wasn't a plea for rescue or a warning of doom. It was a message home, evidence that the seed of empathy, planted ages ago by the first, had survived. The test was not about survival or dominance. It was about the endurance of kindness amid entropy. The console glowed brighter. Above me, the ship's surface opened like a flower of metal and light. The air thickened, vibrating with the resonance of language no human voice could form. The chamber filled with soundless music, frequencies that felt like emotion itself. I understood then that I wasn't sending a transmission through space. I was the transmission. Every thought, every memory, every act of love or cruelty I had witnessed flowed through me into the machine, a record of humanity's contradictions. It wasn't purity the Watchers had been waiting for. It was proof of struggle, of choice. The signal asked a single question. Does light still exist in them? The ship answered, "Why?" A beam of gold erupted upward through the ice, piercing miles of frozen crust, reaching into the open sky. The ground shook, but gently, like the exhalation of a great being waking from sleep. Snow cascaded down the sides of the ridge, shimmering under the beam's glow. For the first time, the Antarctic light felt warm. I stepped back, blinded, tears freezing against my face. The beam pulsed 3 times, once for the first, once for the alien, once for us. Then it narrowed, focused, and vanished. Silence returned, but it was not empty. The ship's surface dimmed to a soft silver, its work complete. On the console, a final line of glyphs appeared before fading into darkness. Signal accepted. Home has heard. I collapsed to my knees, breath ragged, hands trembling. The light was gone, but its echo remained inside me, a quiet assurance, like a heartbeat too deep to hear. I looked toward the tunnel and saw the horizon again, bright and endless. The sky above shimmered faintly, as if something unseen moved beyond it. For a brief, impossible moment, I felt the presence return, not as a voice, but as warmth, surrounding me like sunlight through ice. And in that warmth came one final understanding, soft and absolute. We were never meant to worship the light. We were meant to continue it. Then the wind rose again, erasing my footprints as I began the long walk back to the surface, carrying nothing but that invisible pulse, steady and eternal. The moment the beam vanished, the world fell silent. No wind, no vibration, no echo, just the vast white emptiness of Antarctica, frozen in its own astonishment. I stood alone inside the chamber, surrounded by faint traces of light still lingering in the air, like the afterimage of a vanished star. The ship had gone dormant again, but it no longer felt lifeless. Its silence carried purpose, the stillness of completion. Then, slowly, the walls began to tremble. The ground beneath my boots pulsed once, twice, a heartbeat from the earth itself. Above, fractures spread through the ice ceiling. Daylight spilled through them, sharp and blinding, scattering into millions of shimmering fragments. The temperature rose several degrees in seconds. Water dripped from the walls, steam curling around me in ghost-like ribbons. I realized the chamber was collapsing. The signal's release had destabilized the structure. The ship had done what it came to do, and now the ice that had guarded it for millennia was returning to the ocean. I ran toward the tunnel, each step heavier as the ground shifted under me. Behind me, the hull emitted one last low hum, a farewell. At the tunnel's edge, I looked back. The ship was glowing faintly again, not gold this time, but a pure, pale white, like moonlight reflected through mist. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a shape within that light. Tall, thin, graceful. The same silhouette I had seen in the containment tank, now standing free. Its eyes met mine across the distance, and I understood without words. It was leaving. A column of radiance rose from the chamber, cutting through ice and snow with surgical precision. It was silent, but the silence itself roared. The beam ascended straight into the sky, piercing the thin blue above the Antarctic plateau. I fell to my knees as the ground heaved beneath me. The ridge erupted in a spray of steam and vapor, and the light grew so bright I could see my own bones through my hands. For a moment, just one, the entire sky ignited, not in fire, but in something gentler, something sacred. Clouds refracted the beam into a cross-shaped halo, spreading from horizon to horizon. Every flake of ice shimmered, as though infused with inner flame. I couldn't breathe. It was too vast, too beautiful. I realized I was witnessing not destruction, but ascension. The ship rose through the light, shedding layers of frost like old skin. Its surface cracked, then reformed, as though rebuilding itself from memory. For an instant, it resembled a sphere, then a spiral, then something my mind could not describe. Geometry beyond the human sense of shape. And within that transformation, I saw the being once more, radiant and unbroken, dissolving into the light that birthed it. Then everything stopped. The beam folded inward, imploding into a single blinding point. The air exploded outward with a force that hurled me across the ice. I hit the surface hard, rolled, and lay still. When I looked up, the ridge was gone. Only a vast crater remained, filled with mist that glowed faintly from within. The storm returned, sweeping snow across the landscape, erasing the evidence of what had happened. Yet above the horizon, suspended in the clouds, there lingered a faint symbol, a glowing cross of refracted light, slowly fading into blue. I don't know how long I lay there. Time had lost all meaning. My instruments were dead, my radio silent. When I finally stood, I saw shapes approaching from the distance. Rescue teams, perhaps, or the same agents who had hunted us before. It didn't matter. I had nothing left to hide, and nothing left to give. The truth was beyond containment now. They took me aboard a transport helicopter. Through the window, I watched the crater disappear beneath the returning storm. No one spoke. The sky behind us shimmered faintly, as though reality itself had been rewritten in light. By the time we reached the coastal station, the first reports were already circulating. Satellites across the globe had detected a massive energy spike over Antarctica. Unexplainable, brief, but measurable. Power grids flickered. Auroras appeared over cities that had never seen them, and then it was gone. They examined me for hours. They found no radiation, no physical trace of what I described. They dismissed it as shock, oxygen deprivation, hallucination. But when they turned off the lights, the room glowed faintly around me, the same soft white as the ship's dying light. They could not explain that. That night, lying on the cot in the infirmary, I dreamt of the alien, not as a stranger, but as something familiar, something human. Its face changed, shifting between forms until it resembled my own. And then another face. A man radiant with calm, eyes filled with sorrow and forgiveness. The first, the being of light. The one who had come to see if we could still love what we feared. When I woke, dawn had spread across the ice. The sun was brighter than I had ever seen it. A helicopter waited outside, ready to take me home. I stepped onto the snow and felt warmth on my face. Impossible warmth in a place where warmth should not exist. I looked once more toward the ridge, now sealed and still, and whispered words that were not prayer, but gratitude. The light had returned to its source. The test was over. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of sky or time, I felt it. A pulse, slow and infinite, echoing through everything that lives. Months passed before I could speak about Antarctica again, though even months felt like a poor measure of time. The world had continued as if nothing had happened. Governments denied the satellite data. Scientific agencies blamed the polar light on magnetic storms, and every trace of the expedition was sealed behind layers of bureaucracy. The ridge was marked as unstable terrain. The files disappeared. The names of the lost were never mentioned again. I was flown to a military hospital somewhere in the southern hemisphere. They said it was for neurological observation. The walls were white, the windows sealed. Each day I filled out psychological evaluations, all designed to measure how much I still remembered. I learned to give them the answers they wanted, that I had seen nothing, that exhaustion and hypoxia had caused my visions. The more I said it, the more they believed me. But memory is not erased by will. It becomes something subtler, an echo, a rhythm, a pulse beneath conscious thought. Even when I convinced myself that none of it had been real, I would wake at night to the faint vibration in my chest, as though something inside me was still in communication with the ice. When they finally discharged me, I returned home to a world that no longer felt like mine. The city lights seemed colder, flatter. People moved with the same blind urgency, eyes fixed on screens, hearts beating to invisible algorithms. Life had resumed, but it felt mechanical, hollow, unanchored. I realized that humanity had no idea how close it had come to ending, not in fire, but in silence. I rented a small apartment near the coast and tried to live quietly. I wrote down what I could remember, not for others, but to anchor myself. The words felt inadequate. Language seemed too fragile to hold what I had seen. I wrote about the ship, the being, the beam, the feeling of standing inside something larger than history. But each time I reread the pages, I tore them up. It wasn't meant to be recorded. It was meant to be remembered. Weeks later, strange things began to happen. At first, it was the radio. Late at night, when every station went to static, I would hear faint rhythmic tones, 3 pulses, a pause, then 3 more. Not random noise, but deliberate pattern, the same sequence that had once echoed through the alien ship. Then came the lights, short bursts across the horizon, golden and fleeting, appearing just before dawn. One morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no return address. Inside was a small recording device and a note. "You're not alone. The signal continues." I played the recording. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. The low, steady heartbeat of the ship beneath the ice, and then, layered within it, a human voice, distorted by distance, but clear enough to understand. "Do not let them make you forget. The seed is alive." For a long time I sat motionless, listening. The voice was not the aliens. It was the technicians, the friend who had died when the chamber collapsed. His tone was calm, without fear, as though speaking from a place beyond death. The transmission ended with a single phrase that seemed to echo from both human and inhuman origins at once. "He waits until we become what we were meant to be." After that, the phenomena spread. Around the world, amateur radio operators reported intermittent bursts of structured frequencies, identical to what we had heard in the Antarctic chamber. Astronomers detected minor fluctuations in deep space background noise, forming repeating harmonic intervals. News outlets ignored it, calling it data corruption. But I knew better. The message was moving again, carried through static, through machines, through consciousness itself. Sometimes I wonder if the transmission even needs the ship anymore. Maybe it moved into us, into anyone who witnessed, believed, or simply felt that moment when light pierced the ice. Perhaps we became the transmitters, each heartbeat a fragment of the same signal. The last time I walked by the ocean, the horizon shimmered faintly with pale light. The tide was unusually calm. In the sound of the waves, I could almost hear the pulse again, distant, deliberate, alive. I realized then that the truth of what had happened didn't need proof. Proof was for the living. The truth belonged to something older, to the first, to the being of light, to every act of compassion that had ever defied extinction. We had not failed the test. The signal had been sent. Humanity had been seen. And though the world would forget, I would not. Because forgetting is not the end of memory. It is only its disguise. That night, as I drifted towards sleep, I felt it again. That gentle warmth at the edge of consciousness, neither dream nor thought, whispering from a place beyond words. Do not search for heaven above the stars. It is already within you. They arrived on a bright morning, the kind of sterile, perfect daylight that hides everything. I was at home, standing by the window, listening to the slow rhythm of the waves when a black vehicle stopped outside. 3 men stepped out, dressed in identical gray suits. They moved without hurry, without sound, as if the world itself had been expecting them. When I opened the door, they already knew my name. Their badges bore no insignia, only a single word embossed in silver. Foreign memory. The one in front spoke first. His voice was calm, practiced, almost kind. We're here for a standard follow-up. Routine protocol after extended polar assignments. You won't need to pack much. There was no threat, no visible weapon, only inevitability. I followed them into the car. The streets looked normal. Sunlight on glass, children on sidewalks, life continuing. Yet everything felt staged, like a reconstruction meant to comfort the recently erased. We drove for hours along the coast until the landscape turned to empty plains. The building they brought me to looked harmless. A research clinic, surrounded by fields of tall grass, swaying under blinding light. Inside, the corridors were white and soundproof. Every step seemed to vanish before it reached the air. They led me to a narrow room with a single chair and a window facing a blank wall. A woman entered, holding a tablet. She smiled with professional warmth. "We just need to help you rest," she said. "Your memories have been complicated. Sometimes clarity requires correction." I asked if this was about Antarctica. Her expression didn't change. "Antarctica is classified. You never went there." Then the screen on her tablet lit up. My entire life appeared in data points, photos, work logs, health records. But one section was blurred. The months of the expedition. Every attempt to recall them triggered a faint tone in the room, low and soothing, designed to interrupt thought. She began to speak softly, the way one might to a patient under anesthesia. "You experienced oxygen hallucinations during field operations. There was no vessel, no entity, no transmission. You were alone. You imagined the rest. It's already fading, isn't it?" For a moment, I almost believed her. The rhythm of her words aligned perfectly with my breathing, lulling me into acceptance. But then, beneath that calm surface, something stirred, a vibration deep in my chest, faint but familiar. The heartbeat. The tone in the room faltered. The tablet flickered. On the blurred section of my file, the haze cleared for a second, revealing a single image. The ridge, glowing white beneath the sky. The woman froze. Her voice stuttered. "That's not possible," she whispered. The lights dimmed. A hum filled the air, not from the machines, but from within the walls. The sound built slowly, the same frequency that had carried the alien signal. Papers lifted from the desk, drawn upward by static. The woman shouted for assistance, but the door sealed automatically. The screen blazed with gold light. Across it appeared one final message, written in the same alien glyphs I had seen beneath the ice. The translation system rendered it instantly. Memory cannot be erased, only delayed. The lights went out. Silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing outside on the field. The building was gone, or perhaps it had never existed. The grass swayed in the same perfect windless rhythm. The car, the agents, the woman, all vanished like a dream on waking. Only the sunlight remained, warm and painfully bright. I looked at my reflection in the side of a parked maintenance vehicle nearby. A small mark glowed faintly at the base of my neck. Not a scar, but a symbol. The same spiral of light that had appeared on the ship's hull. I touched it, and the hum returned, soft and steady beneath my skin. They had tried to erase me, but the signal had rewritten itself into memory, woven into biology. I was no longer just a witness. I was part of the transmission now. When I returned home, I found my journal open on the table, though I remembered locking it away. On the last page, written in handwriting that was both mine and not mine, were 7 words. He did not leave. He became us. I stood by the window again, watching the horizon blur into light. The air was still. The world looked unchanged, but beneath the surface, something vast and invisible had awakened. Somewhere, across oceans and continents, others like me would begin to remember. And though the world would call it madness, or myth, or noise, I knew the truth. The being of light never departed. He simply moved into the only vessel capable of carrying him forward, the human heart.